I always say this, but today I really mean it. Robby, I'm so excited to hear what's on your radar.
All right, well, if you watched Rising last week, you know that we talked about President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan a lot. And we're not done. It's something that myself and many of our libertarian and right-leaning guests vehemently oppose, whereas many of our left-leaning hosts and guests are in favor of it, although several of them think it doesn't go far enough. If you watched our commentary on this issue, you'll understand that we don't pull punches on the show as much as we agree on some issues that unite populists on the left and the right. We also do disagree, really disagree, on some fundamental policy questions. We think it's important to have these discussions, these debates, these arguments, and have them civilly and respectfully as much as possible, but have them nonetheless. And it's not just for the cameras. When the video ends, we stop recording. Me and Brianna Joy Gray, who hosted with me last week, Tuesday through Thursday, we often continue the conversation with each other, debating just as aggressively as we do on the show. And the same has been true of other various pairs of hosts. We think it's valuable to show actual differences of opinion because, frankly, most other news and opinion shows on other platforms and other channels, they usually feature broad agreement between the hosts and the guests. Where's the fun in that? I think it's better to present a range of views and leave it up to the audience to decide who they think made the better case on individual policy questions. But here's the thing. All of us who host the show respect each other enough to argue in good faith. It may get heated, but we know that we all come from a well-meaning place. I would like to contrast that with how opponents of student debt forgiveness, like myself and like you, Batya, have been treated by mainstream and progressive commentators elsewhere in the pundit sphere. So New York Magazine called Biden's plan an act of mercy that will ignite the class war. Writer Sarah Jones had the nerve to describe opposition to Biden's loan forgiveness plan as what it looks like when an elite class defends its territory. According to Jones, opposition to this plan is coming from the elites, who I guess want the non-elites to suffer. Her first two examples of people who are part of the elite and are supposedly attacking the indebted little guys were me and Batya. Jones writes that our objections to the Biden plan are a tell, are proof that for a certain few among us, college is principally a way to reproduce the same elite class in perpetuity. This is absurd commentary. Many of us who are opposed to student debt forgiveness oppose it for the very reason that it benefits a certain elite class, those who went to college, over a non-elite class, those who didn't. Yes, you can technically have plenty of advantage without going to college, and yes, you can go to college but fail to graduate or take on so much debt that you end up worse off than you were without it. But by and large, the college-seeking coalition is the elite coalition. It's disproportionately the Democratic coalition. It has cultural hegemony, and in most cases, it has economic power. Yes, some people who took out college loans are in bad shape, and Biden talked about them when he announced the plan last week.
An entire generation is now saddled with unsustainable debt in exchange for an attempt, at least, at a college degree. The burden is so heavy that even if you graduate, you may not have access to the middle-class life that the college degree once provided.
Here's my question, and it's a question I asked repeatedly last week. If the system is so bad for so many people, why aren't we changing the system? After all, his is quite an indictment of the federal student loan program. So one might have expected that Biden's generous debt forgiveness plan would be accompanied by serious reforms to the underlying system that produce such inequities. The government is conceding that its loan program has scammed millions of desperate people, their situation so dire, their prospect of repayment so dim, that Biden is requiring everyone else to pitch in and help them. But Biden's debt forgiveness plan will do nothing, absolutely nothing, to fundamentally change the incentive system that created this doom spiral in the first place. Degree seekers will continue to borrow large amounts of money to buy, in some cases, useless education. Indeed, they might feel even more encouraged to do so now that this precedent has been set. Meanwhile, colleges and universities will have even less incentive to lower costs. They're going to spiral out of control. Economic researchers have often found that the government subsidized student loans cause educational institutions to jack up their prices for obvious reasons. If the feds cover the cost on the front end, no matter what it is, universities have every incentive to raise the sticker price. Forgiving student loan debt exacerbates this problem since it encourages more reckless borrowing. Indeed, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates the cumulative student debt level will return to current levels in just a few years. There are structural incentives that push students to borrow money that they can never hope to pay back. And the fact that so many people have fallen into crippling debt is a compelling reason to change these incentives. No rule says the federal government has to lure people down a path that leads them to financial ruin with some frequency. Congress can sharply limit or even end this policy. A one-off cancellation of some level of debt held by borrowers who happen to be in dire straits at this specific moment in time, well, that does nothing to fix the underlying problems. On the contrary, makes them worse. It's a slap in the face to everyone who either paid down their college debt or made different educational choices to avoid accruing it in the first place. If Biden wanted to make the strongest conceivable case for forgiving some college debt, this course of action needed to be paired with serious changes to the entire higher education system, how we fund it. Otherwise, Biden is simply engaged in a vast transfer of wealth, taking hard-earned money from those who did not fall prey to the federal government scam and awarding it to those who unfortunately did. So that's my take on this bocce. And it's not, we're being tarred as unsympathetic, as how, we just want suffering people to continue to suffer. We don't want to help them. And it just misses the whole part of this, which is that the loans were made by the taxpayers, that the government doesn't have a magic pile of money that doesn't come from where else. It's given to people from us, and now they can't pay it back. And they're saying it's heartless to say, well, wait a minute, if we just, wipe out that debt for you, we gave you the money, so we're not getting it back. And then we're not changing the system at all that caused that. That's what I don't get. If you're going to say this is so broken that we have to do this, but not change this, it's an indictment of the system. It's an admission that this system is bad. So we have to change it. We have to change something about how higher education is funded and paid for. And Biden seems to concede that, but we're not doing it. Even though I think you could probably get some bipartisan support and interest, if it's the Democrats so worried about the debt and what this is doing to young people or anyone who takes out debt, and Republicans are very concerned about the kind of cultural sway that universities, that elite education holds over our society. We're worried that it's being overvalued, that in the humanities, the liberal arts, there's a lot of needless degrees that are being subsidized actually to the detriment of our society, including just the people who seek them. So let's put together some legislation, but just doing this without that, I think it is really misguided.
Where do you come down on the motivation question here?
Mm-hmm. Well,
how cynical is your reading of this?
Look, it's this largely rewards the Democratic coalition, because this wouldn't have been true 20 years ago, but it is true now that the Democratic coalition is disproportionately the college-seeking and the diploma-attaining class. So it rewards Democrats. Look, and there's nothing. It is not crazy for a political leader to want to reward the coalition that put him in power. So I'm not saying it is necessarily nefarious in nature to do that. I'm just saying that I think it's misguided, given that there's going to be no other change. We can have this same level of debt, this same problem, just as many people in desperate financial straits 5 years from now and 10 years from now. It could be worse for them. It could be because the colleges are going to raise tuition even further. They're going to have to take bigger loans, and that's what we're going to create. So I think in the short term, yes, it's a little bit of a reward to a coalition that Biden wants to show up in November. Young, very progressive people are maybe less who like the kind of Twitter elite consensus that you were complaining about in A Block, Batya. They might be feeling a little bit de-energized right now to vote for Biden. So maybe this gets them moving in the right direction. Although many progressives, including Brianna, who co-hosts the show sometimes, would argue that this doesn't go nearly far enough. So I don't know if it'll make people mad and then fail to sufficiently excite enough progressives. I don't know about, strategically, I don't know. I think it's an open question. It is a little bit of a reward. I don't know that that's nefarious, but I do think it's a bad policy idea.
Yeah. I mean, I can't disagree with anything you said.
Well, I am definitely looking forward to your take on the whole student loan debt cancellation issue. That'll be in your radar coming up next.